Islam, family. I rise giving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the highest of praise and the highest of honors to his holy and divine prophet Noble Drew Ali. I extend those honors to the harbinger, the forerunner, the honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who did warn and still the nations. I give honors to the Moorish American standard, the red flag with the green 5-pointed star in the center, representing the highest principles that I know in man, which are love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I also acknowledge the United Mercantile Trading Banner, also known as the American flag. I give honors to all Moorish Americans, both past, present, and future, who strive to perpetuate this Moorish divine and national movement by way of the Prophet's holy instructions and divine laws. I give honors to Temple Number 19, the Noble Sheikh staff, and the admin staff, and the Mighty Vanguards, also known as the M19s, who keep the peace. And last but certainly not least, I give honors to you, the elves and bays, and our sympathizers in the sacred groves, because when man honors man, he honors our Father God Allah. Islam? Once again, all praises are due to Allah for having us here on this holy day evening so we may continue to build on things that make us better citizens. What I want to talk to today is, I'm actually going to keep it kind of loose because of the climate of the meeting, but we're still going to keep on course as far as understanding this Moorish Divine and National Movement, understanding our Prophet, Noble Drew Ali, in this Moorish Divine and National Movement, because oftentimes I've observed in my travels, and this is not for everyone, this is, you know, in my travels, I should say, in my travels, more often than not, when we talk about nationality, when we talk about what our purpose is, regardless if we're Moorish Americans or if we're just being active in the conscious community, what is it that we're looking to do? What is our agenda? What is our goal? Do we actually have a full idea of what it is that we're looking to do, Islam family? What we're looking to do in this realm, on this realm of Asia. We talk about revolution. We talk about promoting and perpetuating nationality. We talk about all these things being those who wants to make our condition better. But do we fully have that understanding? Because it says in our Moorish Holy Quran, it says, know thyself and thy Father God Allah. And so in order for us to know thyself, we have to understand what is it that we're called to do? What is it that we're looking to do in this movement? Keeping it within the bounds of the Moorish Science Temple of America. I'm not going to put myself in a position to speak on behalf of other organizations or other groups of people that may have their own particular agenda. But what I can speak for, at least my measure of understanding from what the Prophet has given me, the importance of knowing what nationality is, the importance of knowing, you know, once understanding and knowing what nationality is, have a full understanding on what we're called to do. As it says, and I'm paraphrasing in our Moorish Holy Quran, it says, faith sometimes get lost in belief. And what does he mean by that? He means that sometimes our ideals can get juxtaposed. What we may think is one thing, in all actuality is another, and vice versa. And I know that may sound like I'm mincing words or I'm exercising semantics, but case in point, you know, so we can actually stay on subject. I just had I was just discussing with some of the vanguards before we lowered the meeting. What are we to do as Moorish Americans during these Roman holidays? You know, we have family members, so are we to? It's up to them. It's up to their discretion whether or not they want to make an exception and accommodate their family, especially if they haven't seen their family in a while. I can only speak for myself. I have family in Richmond, Virginia. Because of my work schedule, I may not be able to go see my family and spend time with them, with the exception of being, you know, I may not be able to do it on this holiday. This may be the only day I'm able to do it. I may be able to go out of town. Does that mean that I'm observing the holiday? No, that means I'm spending time with my family. So it's a difference from doing that, and then you have those that are Moorish Americans that say, that know the prophet and understand the prophet, and they decide that they want to celebrate or observe Thanksgiving, knowing that the prophet has written an article on the meaning behind Thanksgiving, and according to the Moorish Science Temple of America and this Moorish Divine and National Movement. Do you all understand what I'm saying?
It's not.
All right. So with that in mind, do we know what a nation is? We say we're a nation building. When we talk to our brothers and sisters in the Moorish American community or outside of the Moorish American community, they say, well, what's the science, family? Nation building. So what does that entail? What does that consist of when somebody's saying we're nation building? Are we saying it just because it sounds good, or are we being sincere? And so in order for us to say we're nation building, we have to understand what a nation is. We have to understand what nationality is, outside or beyond the Black's Law Dictionary, if you will, and we have to have a full understanding of what are the elements that it takes to build a nation. All right? So, I want to do this. I want to read in our Moorish Holy Quran, chapter dealing with the soul of man. And that's chapter 38 in our Moorish Holy Quran. When you all have gotten there, I want to hear Islam. And it's on page 69. What's up, brother? Islam. All right. Holy instructions from the prophet, the soul of man. The blessing, O man, of thy external part is health, vigor, and proportion. The greatest of these is health. What health is to the body, even that is honesty to the soul. Islam? That thou hast the soul is of all knowledge the most certain of all truths, the most plain unto thee. Be meek, be grateful for it. Seek not to know it perfectly. It is unscrutable. Thinking, understanding, reasoning, will, call these not the soul. They are its actions, but they are not its essence. Let me say that again. Thinking, understanding, reasoning, willing, call not these the soul. They are its actions, but they are not its essence. Raise it not too high, that thou be despised, that thou be not despised. Be not thou like those who fall by climbing, neither debase it to the sense of brutes. Nor be thou like to the horse and the mule, in whom there is no understanding. Search it by its faculties, know it by its virtues. They are more in number than the hairs of thy head. The stars of heaven are not to be counted with them. Islam? We're going to stop right there. Why did I read that? I read that because when we talk about the soul, when we look to define the soul, we often, the soul, as it says in this Moorish Holy Quran, it's it's almost undescribable, but we know it's there. We know it's there by its faculties. We know it's there by its attributes. But for us to literally define what is the soul, as the prophet said, things that are interpreted, things that are infinite cannot be interpreted by finite minds. We can only interpret it to the best of our ability. So when we define what is the soul, and I can only speak for myself, I define the soul as that element that sparks emotion, and that emotion is sparked or is driven by the attributes of Allah that are within you. These 99 plus attributes of Allah that are within you. So we know that Allah is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, so on and so forth. We know that. We know that these are the same attributes and elements that are within, that are in yourself. All right. And what happens is when you engage with a brother and sister or sister, and you demonstrate these attributes, you get a reaction, because these are reciprocal relationships, and you get that and that draws a better understanding, not just of yourself, but of the person that you're engaging and interacting with. So if you were to look to your brother, you say, Islam, blessed holy day, Muslim, I love you. He can respond, give a favorable reply, or he can do the opposite. Either way is going to ensue a reaction and an emotion inside of you, which will better understand, which will better understand who you are, and will also better understand who the brother is, or who this brother is that is sitting beside you. You know what I'm saying? So that is generating a spirit for you to gain a better understanding, and that is the soul. Islam? All right. So how is that relative to nationality? So unlike the soul, we know what nationality is. We know what a nation is. We say that in Black's Law's dictionary that nationality is defined as that quality of character which arises from a person belonging to a nation or a state. And then we also define nationality as something that defines a person's political status. So we know what nationality is. So what is a nation? Because we say a nationality is that quality of character from a person belonging to a nation or state. So now the key to the thing that we have to think about is how where does that quality of character come from? It comes from that nation. So now, what is a nation? A nation, simply put, our prophet said that Islam is a simple faith. Don't let anybody tell you if somebody wants to break down what a nation is, what they'll do is they'll tell you that a nation is they'll say that it's a military, it's economics, it's education, it's land. They'll specifically say it's land. Having a nation, you can't have a nation without having land. They'll say that. But again, going back to chapter 38, it says these are its actions, but it doesn't define what it is. What is nation? You know what nation is? A nation is unity. Simply put, a nation is unity. And how do you establish that unity? You establish that unity by establishing or perpetuating and upholding a particular ideal. And what makes it a nation is that when you adhere to that particular ideal for all the days of your life. Because that's how you're going to define your nationality. That's how you're going to demonstrate your nationality. Because again, nationality is that quality of character which arises from a person belonging to a nation or state. So you're going to get that quality of character from knowing what your nation is about. How do you know what your nation is about? So now you have to study your nation. You have to study the ideals. You have to study the principles. You have to study the virtues and the faculties of the nation to understand who you are. And not only do you have to exhibit that, but the brother that's sharing your same ideal, he has to exhibit that as well. This is the interesting thing. It's not a trick question, but it is a trick question. How many people can be in a nation?
Limitless.
Okay, so if it's limitless, what's the minimal amount of people that can be in a nation?
Let's just start with one person.
One person. One person can be a nation. Why is that? One person can be that nation because as long as that person carries the ideals of that particular concept, that concept of their definition of unity, then that nation lives on. It is that person's responsibility to pass that to generation and to form a physical unity so they can continue to build education, to build an economy, to build a military, to get a place where a place to establish a place of domicile to where that can be your place, but it's not necessary. If you get a chance, have you ever studied Theodore Herzl and the Zionist Jews? Okay, if you have some writing material, I want you to research The Jewish Question and the Jewish State by Theodore Herzl. And so the reason that I'm using that as a point of reference, because even though we share more science of America have similarities, and we also have differences as far as the Zionist Jews. And the difference is the similarities that we have is that we have what you call the quote unquote Negro question. But it's in the States, or in these United States, is actually defined, or is actually called the Negro Problem. Since the turn of the century, the turn of the 20th century, you've had groups of people that share an idea and looking to establish themselves based on this ideal. And what you have in reference to the Zionist Jews is you have a group of people that were born Europeans, they were born in Germany, but they decided, generally speaking, to define themselves based on the practices of Judaism. They didn't want to be defined by their race or their ethnicity. Interestingly enough, they wanted to be defined by their faith and their belief, which every person has the right to be defined, by however they want to be defined. But that Jewish question came about because they were still living on German soil, and they refused to be called Germans. They wanted to be called Jews. They wanted to be called Zionist Jews. So the issue is how is it that they were able to? How could they fit in the state, in the German state? We're looking at our time. We may later on get into what is the state. But how is it that these Jews? How can they operate within the German state? How is it that they can operate within the European construct if they're not considering themselves to be Europeans? So what happens is simple civics. If you remove yourself from being a citizen, then you're going to suffer abuse by those who still consider themselves to be citizens. All right, point blank. If you remove yourself our prophet Nabi Ali talks about separating yourself from Allah. As above, so below. So if we're supposed to hold on to the rope of Allah, Allah, and we let go of that rope, we're going to suffer. If we remove ourselves from the concept of unity and we decide to embark on individualism, we are going to suffer. We are going to suffer, by the masses. We're going to suffer by the majority, because you have people that are investing in this particular thing and you're not. And so what you're doing is siphoning. You're living off the people's sacrifice. And so what you're going to do is they're not going to be too happy about that. And so they're going to express how unhappy they are about that to you. And so that's what happened to the Jews. They said, well, we're not German, we're Jews. We're from we're from Europe, but we want to establish ourselves based on our faith. So what does that mean? Is that so you're saying that you're not going to follow the rules of the Germans, or you're not going to follow the words of the rules of Europe? Okay, that's fine. Then you will suffer. So throughout, I would say, for the past 40 years, from 1900s, probably even before that, all the way to 1948, 49. They suffered. During that time, even through World War II, of course, during that time, you had this cat by the name of Theodore Herzl that heard the remarks about this Jewish question. You also hear that with the Armenian question, because during that time too, you had the Armenians that were looking for freedom, establishing their own nationality and their own state. But going back to the Zionist Jews, Theodore Herzl, contrary to popular belief, he didn't know that much about the doctrine. He didn't know that much about the Judaic doctrine. But what he did know is that there is a tradition, there was a culture that he wanted to continue, he wanted to perpetuate. And he knew that this was something that he wanted to survive generations. So he made that push. Theodore Herzl is the Zionist Jews equivalent to Noble Drew Ali, if you will. So he wrote what you call Der Judenstaat. That's German for the Jewish state. And basically what it talks about is it actually gives his commentary and his solution. He says that, he gives the answer by redundantly asking the question, what are you doing with these, so many people that live in Germany that call themselves Jews? Matter of fact, it's so similar that our prophet in the Moorish literature, he actually does the same thing. I don't know, for you all that have a copy of the Moorish literature, just turn to what should we call him, and if not, you all can just listen. But I want you to hear this, while I'm reading, because keep in mind, like I said, brother, keep in mind what I said about Theodore Herzl, when he gave the answer to the Jewish question, and our prophet Noble Drew Ali is giving the people that live in the United States and all over the world, he's giving them the answer to the quote-unquote Negro problem. And the article is called, What Should We Call Him? So often our various journalists find trouble in selecting a proper name for the Moorish American. Some say Negro, another will brand him race man, still another will call him Afro-American. And then come colored, dark American, coon, shine, the brethren, and your folks. It is indeed a hard matter to find something suitable for the various occasions where a title needs to be used. Is it that these people have no proper name? Did they have a national name when they were first brought to these shores in the early part of the 17th century? If so, what was it? Did not the land from which they were forced to have did not the land from which they were forced to have a name? It now appears a good idea for those whose duty it is to write for various journals to find out what the national name of the forefathers of these people was. Also look into the history of the founders of the civilization and see who they were and where they stood in building of the present civilization. Probably 2 hours in an up-to-date library were served to relieve the strain on our men of letters. When the occasion presents itself for a title for these people, the matter of the various names given to these 22 million people, and that was in, I would go, if this is written by the prophet, well, since this is written by the prophet, pardon self, you're looking at between 1913 and 1929 that this was written. All right, so it was at that time 22 million people. 22 million people of Asiatic descent, of our people, the so-called Negro that was living in America. Can you imagine? And now you're looking at 2017. It's much, much more now. And we still haven't defined ourselves yet. All right, so they give him a name, then defined it as something inferior to theirs. White, they define as a color of purity. Black, they say, represents everything evil. The Negro, as they were called in this nation, have no nation to which they might look with pride. Their history starts with the close of the Civil War, or more properly, with his being forced to serve someone else. Thus he is separated from the illustrious history of his forefathers, who were the founders of the first civilization of the old world. This matter should be looked into with the hope of correcting it. Islam. So what our prophet is saying to us, or what he's addressing rather, is first and foremost, when we think of the word, as a Moorish American, the term black according to science means death. That is not to say that we do not understand the spiritual context that comes behind being black. We understand it. The issue lies is when that name was not from our forefathers. We did not give ourselves that name. That name was given to us. Therefore, we're subjected to their definition. See, when we have a discussion with our counterparts in regards to why we should remove ourselves as being defined as blacks as a race, they like to use the concept as we have the power to define, and since we have the power to define, we should have the power to redefine. And that sounds good, but the issue is underlining is how is it that you're redefining something that was given to you? Why should you redefine a name that that was given to you by someone else that doesn't have your best interest in mind? You understand what I'm saying, brother? That's just like, what's the name you hate? You hate Tommy. I'm just say Tommy. If I call you Tommy, and you have no choice but to be referred to as Tommy, you know what I'm saying? You despise that name, but you're going to say, and I'm saying that Tommy means that Tommy means a person that gravels in the dirt all day. And I tell that to him, I tell that to this brother, I tell that to this brother, I tell that to sisters. So everybody knows that when they think of Tommy, not only do they think of you, they think of a person that gravels in the dirt. And I'm going to turn around and look to change a multitude of people in thinking that your name, Tommy, means something else. It means an illustrious man. It means a man that has high moral value and character. That's not going to happen. As much as you can try, that's not going to happen. But what you can do is you can remove that name. You can remove that name, and you can establish a name for yourself. You can call yourself, because you as a human being has a right to define yourself, not by someone else's standards, but by your standards. And that's the difference. As long as we're continuing to call ourselves by a name that constantly deludes us to slavery, we're constantly defining ourselves by the standards of someone else that has given us that name. But if we call ourselves by a name and we give ourselves a status, or we put ourselves in the state of mind, if you will, that gives us the ability to define on our terms, then that's a whole different ballgame. Because now it equals the playing field. Because they call themselves something that's pure. They call themselves something that represents something of a high stature in the upper echelon. They gave that to themselves. Nobody else called them white. And if somebody was to come in and call themselves white, do you think they're going to accept that? Not at all. They're going to stick with the name. They're going to stick with how they define themselves and what gives them a certain element of power. And we should desire to do the same. We should desire to define ourselves based on the prestige of our ancestors. We should be able to define ourselves based on the greatness of our forefathers and our foremothers. And that is what our prophet is reintroducing to us. He's saying that Moorish American is not just a name to sound good. And I think that's something that some of us, I don't want to say simply put, we take it for granted. And I know that may sound harsh, but when we think of that name, Moorish American, we have to think our prophet could have named us or returned to us any other name. But he said Moorish American. And he said Moorish American for a reason. He said Moorish American because that defines a whole culture, and that name goes back all the way to time memorial. Goes back all the way to time memorial. It connects you with the Most High. We are descendants of Moroccans born in America, but the ancient term for Moroccans is Moab. It's Moabite. Moab means of the father. When we refer to of the father, we're talking of the great father. We're talking about the great God Allah. We're talking about Illah. We're talking about the creator. Whatever you want to call it. We're talking about the cause is cause and the root is root from all which all things are formed. You know what I'm saying? Being called black, that's only tracing you back to you being property. Now, brother, as melanated as you are, you're still not the color of that chair that you're sitting on. And I use this parable all the time, that when this being called black or being colored, those are principles of things of ownership. When you're finished with this chair, or this chair happens to break, and it's no more use, what you gonna do? You're gonna toss it. Because that's how we were considered before we were introduced to our prophet. We were considered property. We were considered descendants of property. This is what he's saying, and what shall we call him? This is what Theodore Herzl was saying to the world. He was making a proclamation to the world that's saying, look, these people are important because they come from the Most High. They come from the Creator. And they should be respected as that. And what he's also saying is the answer to this Jewish question is giving us a platform where we can be able to prove ourselves and establish ourselves as being an important part of establishing this world. All nations contribute to society. They are, as the prophet says, involved in the affairs of men. So now the question that you have to ask yourself, now that you know what a nation is, now that you know what a nationality is, and when we think about calling ourselves the black nation or the African American nation, what have we contributed to society? What quality of character have we established for us to be recognized by the government in which we live in the nations of the earth? Because if we're talking about hip-hop music, if we're talking about dancing, if we're talking about basketball, these are things that were not established by us. If we were to be removed, Allah forbid, from the planet Earth, from Asia, what is it that we'll leave behind that they couldn't do nothing without? You know what I'm saying? That's something that we should be thinking about, parts of that. That's something that we should be thinking about. How is it that we're leaving a mark in society? That is the question, and that is the importance of having a nation, because we have to do that together. Having a nation is simply sharing an ideal. What is the ideal? The ideal is redefining who we are. Simply put, this is what our prophet is bringing us. Our prophet is saying that we, being of 22 million plus people living in the United States, we are not the descendants of slaves. That is what he's telling us. We have a rich history. Can we not all adapt that idea? Is not going to take away anything, or that's not going to take away who you are as an individual, saying that no, I am not a descendant of a slave. It is not taking away your identity. You can still rock Air Jordans if you like. You can still drive the finest cars if you like. But to have that ideal is important. We as a community, we suffer from individualism. We want to do our own thing. Because if we do our own thing, that means that we have to answer. We can only answer for ourselves. I remember the thing that was popular back in the days of Tupac. Cats have these tattoos, only God can judge me. Well, if God, if these so-called God is judging you, I'm pretty sure he's going to be judging you by the merits in your actions that you were doing on this earth. So if you're not establishing his paradise on earth, how would you think you would be judged? If you're not helping your brother, man, or your sister in success, then how do you think you'll be judged? If you're just living for self and not taking on accountability and responsibility, how will you be judged? You will be judged. You will be judged nonetheless by your actions. So if you decide that you don't want anybody else to judge you, and you only want God to judge you, then so be it. But nonetheless, you're still going to be judged by your actions. Islam. I'm gonna stop talking, and I'm gonna open the floor for some build. I'm taking it this is not your first time coming to the temple.
No, it's actually my second time here.
Okay.
And last Sunday I visited the temple on Robert
David Abernathy. I'm not familiar with that temple. What temple number is it?
I'm not sure, but Rashid ibn
Okay. I'm familiar with that. Is that the one where he's holding above Tassili's?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar what number that is. But
it's not official.
It's not official yet. Okay, Islam. But I am familiar with the Grand Sheet. Good. I want you. It's important for me that you have a full understanding of Noble Drew Ali. He's our prophet, of the Moorish Science Temple of America, as well as what we do. That is something, if anything, for the past year that I've, that is my revelation, because we have, what we do is we have people that come into the Moorish Science Temple of America that are already members of the Moorish Science Temple of America that have we may not share the same ideals. And praise Allah, we're not meant to have shared, we should have different approaches to the same idea. That's what we're looking for. But it becomes an issue when, my ideal of nationality is different from your ideal of nationality.
Right.
We, in Temple number 19, we consider ourselves to be a grassroots temple. So, what that means is that, we strive to follow the teachings of our prophet verbatim to the best of our ability. We strive to get a understanding of what is it that our prophet is looking for us to do, and we look to achieve that to the best of our ability. Our prophet, when he talks about the Moorish Science Temple of America, again going back to this concept of nationality, and I don't want to. Hopefully, I'm not drilling you with so much information, but again, nationality is an ideal. Nationality can only be achieved by unity. That's just what it is. Those things, when you have those things are achieved by people working together. When you look at when we think of nations from the beginning, when we think of nations, it's different from the United States versus China. Why is that? The reason being is because China is an older country. All right, so when we think of nationality, we have a tendency to think about nationality in the same context as China, or or as India, if you will. And that's not necessarily the case. When we think of nationality, we're thinking about ideal from a collective, and this ideal is shared by groups of people that live in the United States, in different cities, in different towns, and so on and so forth. That is the purpose of the Moorish Science Temple of America. The purpose of the Moorish Science Temple of America is to be that hub to promote that nationality, to promote that togetherness amongst a group of people. When you think of nationality in China is more of what you call and this term ethnic is it can be used as also ethnic nationalism. So ethnic nationalism is the perpetuation of a particular ethnic group, of a particular group of people that share similar ideals, because you have this continent of Asia, and within Asia you have different ethnicities, and one of these in the country you have a group of people that are called Chinese, and they share a general ideal, and just like I told you before, even though they share general ideal, it's different. People have different ways of executing that idea. That's why you have Beijing in the People's Republic of China, amongst some other republics, if you will. But when they come over here, all of them are what? Chinese. All right. We have the ideal that America is a nation. America is not a nation. Why do we say that America is a nation? We say that America is a nation when we pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic from which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That statement, one nation, is actually, in context, that is an ideal. That is something that they desire to be. But the United States of America is actually what you would call a federal republic, meaning that the federal part republic basically means for the people, or giving back to the people. Federal is another way of saying fidel or fidelity. But basically what you're saying is that the United States is, you have a group of people that are pledging fidelity to each other. That's why you get the United States. That's where you get the United States of America, because these states, these ideals, groups of people are supposed to be banding together as a republic that are loyal to each other, or that show fidelity to each other. That's what's supposed to happen. So at the time, and just to keep it simple, the state of Georgia and the state of South Carolina work in conjunction with each other. They do commerce, so on and so forth. But we know that the state of Georgia has its own set of laws, and the state of South Carolina has its own state of laws. All right. But let's just say that the state of Georgia and the state of South Carolina, they have issues. All right. Well, if they have issues, they're supposed to be able to go to a higher court to resolve the issue, which will be the quote-unquote federal government. All right. The federal government also, if you're dealing with, they're also supposed to establish a form of protection for us. All right. So the federal government, for us being a thriving industrial state, we pay alms to this federal government, and in turn they give us protection. That, in other words, nobody's supposed to come in and beat up Georgia. Nobody's supposed to come in and beat up South Carolina, because that's what it's a reciprocal relationship. You follow me? All right. So basically, we are all supposed to be united. All these ideals are supposed to be united. All right. So when you talk about the Jewish state, the term Zionist Jew is the nation. What makes it the state? What makes it a state is how they conduct themselves, which establishes their status. So that's another misconception. The state, again, has nothing to do with the land. It's the laws. We have an ideal, and in order to promote this ideal and perpetuate this ideal, we hold ourselves up to a particular status. We hold ourselves to a particular standard. All right. Therefore, this is how we operate. This is the state. You follow me? All right. So when the United States were formed, they were able to say that these were a group of colonies at that time that had these certain standards or had a particular status, and these colonies were merging together to form, at that time, Articles of Confederations. It was a friendship. And then when they realized that the federal government, or the union, if you will, didn't have as much power, they were practicing individualism. that poses as a threat. Because if you're supposed to be united, if you're supposed to have a union, then everybody is supposed to work in conjunction. But what happened is, and we saw that, what happened is we had a secession. Because when it came into business, when it was decided that we were going to make a transition from being a state or a country, if you will, being a country that was primarily agricultural, and we wanted to make that transition to being an industrious country, herein lies the breakdown in the problem. Because then we had some people there in the South that said, no, we didn't want to do that. We want to do our own thing. Well, that's, that's a breach in our agreement. We gotta have a problem. We gotta hash it out. You know what I'm saying? Don't think for a minute that you can stay in my house and abide by your rules. Don't think for a minute. I can't think for a minute that I can stay in your house and abide by my rules. Because that's your house. You get what I'm saying? Why am I saying this? Because again, there's a breakdown in what is to be defined as nationality. What should we be doing building a nation? Well, first and foremost, we have to understand what kind of nation is Noble Drew Ali looking to establish. Noble Drew Ali is looking to establish a nation state. Okay? And a nation state does not mean that we're looking to have to be a place removed from the government in the United States of America. Not what it means. That does not mean that we're gonna have a plot of land in New Mexico. So that piece of land in New Mexico is gonna be called Moorish land, and then the rest of everywhere else is gonna be, the United States of America, and that's just what it is. No. That's not what a nation state is. A nation state is defined as a group of people that have an established nation, but they abide by the rules of the federal government in which they live. That is a nation state. A nation state does not mean that you are going to, you're going to remove yourself. You're going to secede from the United States and have your own plot of land. Nowhere in history has anybody that has a quote-unquote nation been able to do that. We know that by way of knowing our history. We know that that's not ever going to happen unless it's a war. All right. So what Noble Drew Ali is looking to do is establish nation states around America, and with the Moorish Science Temple of America being that institution that houses that nation state or represents that nation state. All right. So again, what they're doing is they're housing the ideal. They're perpetuating the ideal. They're promoting the ideal. They're promoting that quality and that character on how which you're supposed to act, how which you're supposed to carry yourself while living in the United States of America. Do you follow me? All right. That is what we're doing. All right. So don't, so again, when we talk about how we're looking to establish a nation, we're going to do some nation building, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. First of all, we have to share the same idea. Second of all, we have to know how we can contribute to perpetuating this idea. If everybody has their own ideal on what a nation really is, and how to build a nation, then it's going to always be some squabbles. There's always going to be some conflict. So we, in Temple number 19, we look to keep it simple. We look to not put ourselves in a position where, you know, becoming a nation is convoluted, because it's not convoluted. It's very simple. We can start a nation with the group of people that we have right here. You know, that's the thing that a lot of us don't understand. You think that it has to be something big and extravagant, and we will want it to be that way. We definitely want it to be that way. But the key is the consistency, and the consistency in the work that we do. The consistency lies in how many of us wake up and we make the decision, this is how I want to live my life. I want to live my life as a Moorish American. I want to live my life according to the highest principles that are known to man, which are love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. I want to live my life according to the Moorish American the Moorish Science Temple of America Divine Constitution and bylaws. Mm-hmm. That is how I want to live my life. I make that decision each and every day. And if I fall short, you know, may Allah forgive me, we're going to try it again. And I want to link up with other people that want to do those same things. You know, we may have different approaches, but as long as we stand on those foundations, as long as if we have any issues that we can defer to our Moorish Holy Quran to settle our disputes and to continue to live our lives, then this is the nation building that comes into place. So now once you do that, now once you get a group of people that's on that path and that's thinking of one body and one mind, now you start thinking about, okay, now how can we teach our little ones? Oh, well, we need a school. Okay, well, we know that everyone that we may not be able to right now get that funding from someone else. So let's pull together. Whose house can we use? You know, whose house can we use to, you know, from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. we can put our children in and they can teach. And we can do that. We gonna pull all our resources into that. You see what I'm saying? That's the sacrifices that you make. Okay, now we got a place to you know, where we can teach our children, and some of us can still learn. So now we need businesses. Why do we need businesses? Because we need to establish an economic presence. No nation does not go without an economic presence. Japan is one of the smallest nations in the world, but they have an enormous economic presence. How many of us have PlayStations and Xboxes?
Come on.
How many of us drive Toyotas and Nissans? You know, if Japan decided that they wanted to remove themselves, and you know, how would we survive? If China decided that they wanted to remove themselves and they wanted to put the wall back up again, no more made from China, how will we survive? This is how we should be thinking in what is nation building. Nation. When we say we're nation building, what we should be saying is we're establishing a presence in the world. That's it. That's all we should be doing. And what does that mean? That means that this nation, this ideal should be known around the world. The ideal of the Moorish American should be known around the world. That is nation building. Because how else will we be able to define who we are versus just being Negroes with fezzes on? Mm-hmm. So, you know, the rapper Kevin Gates, it's said that he's part Moroccan. He's like Moroccan / Puerto Rican. I could be wrong. May Allah be pleased with the brother. You know, but he goes to Morocco and conducts himself, you know, less than savory.
That's right.
So, you know, what quality of character is he living? So the fez, our royal headdress that we wear, doesn't mean anything if the person that's beneath it is not living up to that standard, not living up to figure number one. You know what I'm saying? And not only that, but are you able to demonstrate those principles once you take that headdress off? See, that quality of character is supposed to be, a part of every part, second nature. Again, when you wake up every morning, this is what you decide that you want to be. This is what you decide that you want to project to the world. You want to project to the world that this is who you are. And this is how you will be recognized in the government in which you live in the nations of the earth. This is how we are recognized. That is nation building. You know what I'm saying? This is the being recording these lessons in the Moorish Science Temple of America. This is the nation building that we're talking about, because we're projecting to the world what we as Moorish Americans, what we desire to be, and what we're striving to be, what we're striving to accomplish. You know what I'm saying? This cat, Theodore Herzl, he was able to get some assistance from Great Britain because they saw the potential in what he wanted to do. It was unfortunate that the solution that they had was at the expense of someone else. But nonetheless, the point that I'm making is when you start to exhibit a character that the nations of the earth can see as a benefit and see as a contribution, they're going to want to invest. And this is what the prophet is talking about: receiving and conferring reciprocal helps and mutual obligations. But we have to make sure that, again, unlike the said mentioned, that we're not doing it at the expense of someone else. Like, we're not raising ourselves up while tearing someone else down. That's not what we're looking to do. Do you have any questions, brother? Okay. But yeah, if anything, what I want to leave you with is, having a better understanding of what a nation is, and what is it that we, in the Moorish Science Temple of America, we are looking to do as a nation. What we represent. We are to be a part and parcel of this government. And we're going to abide by the rules of the government, because that is what our prophet instructs us to be. So not only do we have a nation, but we have to remember that we're still American citizens. All right?